Today in math, we're going to be measuring the mass of objects using either grams or kilograms. In your interactive notebook, you glue down this foldable with definitions behind each one. Remember, a gram is the same amount as one paper clip. So imagine in your hand that you're holding one paper clip. You are essentially holding 1 gram. And then if you were to pretend again that you're holding that science textbook that's inside of your desk, you would be holding about 1 kilogram. So a gram is a very small unit that we measure with, and a kilogram is a unit that we use to measure heavier objects. You have this anchor chart in your notebook as well. On the right-hand side, again, it's reminding you that a gram is the same size as a small paper clip, and a kilogram is has the same mass as the textbook inside of your desk. We're going to use scales to measure the mass of objects. Looking over here, they give you examples of how to read digital scales, and you're going to have something very similar on your classwork later today. So for instance, on this second example, you have a cube that weighs 234, and to figure out what unit they're measuring with, look at the label that's already on the scale. So you would simply say, this block has a mass of 234 grams. So a paperclip, again, weighs about 1 gram. We often abbreviate grams by just writing the letter G. So in this example of the bread over here, it weighs 600 grams. They abbreviated it with just the letter G. And you can also picture that as weighing the same amount as 600 paper clips. So 600 paper clips weighs the same amount as 1 loaf of bread. And we're also going to use kilograms to measure the mass of objects. So over here, it's telling you that once you reach 1,000 grams, instead of saying, oh, your textbook weighs 1,000 grams, you can simply say, oh, your textbook weighs 1 kilogram. And we abbreviate kilograms by just writing the letters kg. So what we're going to do now is go through a list of objects, looking at some pictures, and we're going to figure out, are we going to use grams or kilograms to measure the mass of it, the weight of it? So this table, I'm looking at it and I'm picturing how heavy tables are that I've seen in the past. I'm going to compare it to my textbook. If this table weighs more than my science textbook inside of my desk, I'm going to use kilograms to measure the mass of it. If it weighs less than the textbook inside of my desk, I'm going to use grams. Well, I know this table is much, much heavier than my textbook, so kilograms would be the best unit of measurement. All I would need to write for my answer is kg to abbreviate for kilograms. On my second example, I have a piece of notebook paper. Again, start with your textbook inside of your desk and think, which one is heavier? Does my paper weigh more than my textbook? If it weighs more, I would use kilograms. Or does my piece of notebook paper weigh less than the textbook? If it weighs less, I would use grams to measure the mass. This piece of notebook paper weighs much less than a textbook, so my answer would be grams, and I would just need to write the letter G. Now let's think about this house. Pull out your whiteboard, marker, and eraser from inside of your desk. Take a moment and pause the video while students get ready. Let's compare this house to that same textbook inside of your desk. You don't need to pull your textbook out, we're just pretending. So let's imagine which is going to be, or is this house going to be heavier than your textbook or less than your textbook? Write down your answer. What would be the best unit to measure the mass of this house? Grams or kilograms? Abbreviate your answer on your whiteboard. Pause the video while students answer. If you answered kilograms would be the best unit to measure the mass of this house, you are correct. If you wrote kg on your board, that is the answer I was looking for because that is the abbreviation for kilograms. Look at this microwave now. Again, compare it to the textbook inside of your desk. Does it weigh more than a textbook or less than a textbook? Pause the video as students answers on their whiteboard. If you said kilograms, you're correct. Again, all you need to write on your whiteboard is kg for kilograms. What about this pillow? Again, compare it to the textbook inside your desk. Does it weigh more than your textbook or less than your textbook? Pause the video. If you said grams and abbreviated with the letter G, you would be correct. A pillow weighs less than your textbook. What about this pretty flower? Does it weigh more than your textbook or less? Always compare it to your textbook. Pause the video as students answer. If you said grams, you would be correct. And again, all you need to write on your whiteboard is the letter G to abbreviate for grams. What about the all-time best quarterback ever, Peyton Manning? Compare him to the science textbook inside your desk. Does he weigh more than the science textbook or less? Write your answer on your whiteboard. If you said kilograms and wrote kg, you would be correct. Again, we use scales to measure the mass of objects. What we just did was we estimated or guessed the best unit, but to be exact, you would need to use a scale, like the ones shown below. So on your classwork, you're going to see something very similar. In this picture, we have a cube, and we're looking at the arrow on this scale to see how much mass is inside of this object. So if I start up here at 0, this is just like a clock. 0 is at the very top of the scale. I can look down to where my arrow is at, and it's pointing at the number 50, which makes sense because the next number would be 100. My numbers are getting bigger as I go around. To answer this question, what's the mass of this object? All I would need to write is 50g to stand for 50 grams. And again, that unit is at the bottom of the scale already. On this example, my cube is on the scale. I need to look at my scale to see what the mass would be. Write your answer on your board and determine what is the mass of this object. Pause the video. If you said 200g for 200 grams, you would be correct. And again, you're going to see scales like this. This present on this scale, we're going to see what the mass of this object would be. Starting up here at 0, I'm going to 10. I can't quite read that number, but the next number that I see is 30. So halfway between 10 and 30 would be 20. And normally they're going to have the letters G or kg on that scale for you to know if it's being measured in grams or kilograms. So which tool would you use to measure the mass of a lizard? Answer on your whiteboard. Pause the video. If you said A, scale, you would be correct. B and D are both tools that we use to measure the volume, how much would fit inside of a container. And C, a ruler, is measuring the length of an object. So here, shown on your screen, is an example of your worksheet that you're going to have today. For numbers 1 through 10, you're figuring out the best unit of measurement for each object. Which unit would you use to measure the mass of each object? So looking at number 1, the mass of a washing machine, would it be A, gram, B, kilogram, C, milliliter, or D, liter? Well, 2 of those things we haven't even talked about today. There were only 2 units of measurement that we even mentioned in today's lesson. So automatically, you should be able to rule out 2 of those. Again, compare it to your textbook. Is it heavier than your textbook or lighter? And then down at the bottom, for 1 through 6, you are reading those scales and writing the abbreviation. On each of your scales, you have the letter G, which stands for grams, or kg. Write down the mass of each object on your worksheet. Make sure your name is on your paper. When you finish this one side of your worksheet, turn it into the math tray.